The cake sat untouched on the counter, its frosting starting to melt just slightly at the edges, the way it always did when I didn't refrigerate it soon enough. I had baked it that morning not because I expected guests, but because it felt wrong to let my own birthday pass without at least pretending it mattered. I even lit a single candle, not for the wish, just for the glow. The sound in the house was a kind of silence that had a weight to it, like a wet sweater draped across your shoulders, something you could feel but couldn't quite shake off. I sat at the kitchen table, the same one where I used to serve birthday pancakes shaped like animals for my children, and I waited. Not because they said they would come. They hadn't. But somehow in my foolish little heart I thought, maybe one of them would call. The phone stayed still. No buzz, no ding, nothing. Just the ticking of the wall clock. It's funny how loud that sound gets when everything else is so still. At one point I caught myself staring at the door like a dog waiting for its master, and when that thought passed through my mind, I laughed a soft, bitter kind of laugh that didn't even make it out of my throat. I didn't cry, not then. I just blew out the candle and whispered happy birthday, like someone might hear it on the wind and send the message back. I remember when they were little, they'd crawl into bed with me in the morning, their tiny arms flung around my neck, their sleepy voices chirping. Happy birthday, Mama, with so much joy it almost hurt. One year they made me cards out of printer paper and crayons full of wobbly hearts and crooked stick figures. I kept those cards for years. I think I still have them somewhere in the attic. But those voices, those hugs, they've grown up into other things now. Polite distance, missed calls, excuses delivered with casual ease, a son too busy, a daughter overwhelmed. They love me, they say, but love shouldn't feel like absence, should it? I watched the sun shift through the kitchen window. I thought about calling them, just to remind them perhaps, but something stopped me. Pride, maybe, or the quiet exhaustion that comes from always having to remind people that you exist. I didn't want to be a burden. That word, burden, it haunts women like me. We're raised to be caretakers, not takers. We serve, we nurture. We hold everyone's feelings like fine china but our own. We keep those tucked away, chipped and dust-covered in the back of the cabinet. So I made myself a cup of tea. I cut a slice of my own cake, and I sat alone at that table with a fork in one hand and silence in the other. I tried to tell myself it didn't matter, that birthdays are just numbers, that I've had enough of them already. But it did matter, not because of the candles or the cake, but because there's something deeply cruel about being forgotten by the very people you once gave your whole life to. There was a time I believed my children would always come back, that no matter how far they roamed, how busy their lives became, there would always be one day, my day, when they would remember. Not with gifts. I never needed gifts. Just a voice, a message, a minute of their day. That would have been enough. I taught them to be thoughtful. Didn't I? I reminded them of every cousin's birthday, every thank you card, after a gift, every act of kindness they owed the world. I thought I was teaching them love, real love, the kind that pays attention. But as I sat there, the tea cooling the cake untouched beyond that first polite bite, a strange thought settled over me like fog. What if I taught them wrong? What if in all my lessons about love, I forgot to include myself? What if I showed them that love is always giving, never asking? What if I modeled silence too well, the kind that waits quietly, never demands, and quietly disappears? They didn't mean to hurt me. I believe that. I truly do. But that doesn't make the hurt any smaller. Sometimes pain doesn't come with slaps or screams. Sometimes it comes with nothing at all. No phone call, No doorbell. Just the sound of a woman singing happy birthday to herself in an empty kitchen. And maybe that's the cruelest part. When they were small, love was easy. It looked like peanut butter sandwiches cut into hearts, like lullabies, hummed with a hand stroking damp hair, like warm socks laid out on cold mornings. I taught them to say please and thank you before they could tie their shoes. I praised every moment of kindness as if it were gold. When they argued, I asked them not just to apologize, but to look each other in the eyes and mean it. I remember telling them, love isn't just a feeling, it's what you do even when it's hard. There were nights I barely slept because one of them had a fever, and I'd sit on the edge of their bed with a damp cloth and whispered comfort. I thought, this is love, showing up, staying up, soft words at 3 a.m. And when they got older, it shifted into homework, help, quiet encouragement after broken hearts, rides to school dances, and standing at the stove while they talked or didn't talk because just being there was the point. I tried so hard to make home feel safe, like love had a shape and smell and sound, clean sheets, warm soup, someone waiting at the window. I didn't know I was building something they'd eventually grow tired of. When you give love freely all the time, without asking anything in return, people start to believe that your giving is endless, that your warmth is just the temperature of the room, that your yes means you have nothing else to do, that your silence means you're fine. But I wasn't fine. They were taught that love meant giving, but maybe they thought the giving always came from someone else, someone like me. It's strange to think back on those lessons. I wanted them to be soft with the world, to be the kind of people who held the door open, who sent thank you cards, who noticed when someone was hurting. And they are, in a way. They are kind to their friends. They volunteer. They donate. They post about causes on their phones. They are decent people in a public, polished kind of way. But kindness has become something they perform out there, not something they bring home. There's a particular ache in being the one who taught someone to love, only to be the one they forget to love back. It makes you question every bedtime story, every stitched costume, every late-night drive you took while blinking back your own exhaustion. And the worst part is you can't ask for it, not without sounding bitter, not without hearing that dreaded phrase, you're being too sensitive. Once my daughter rolled her eyes when I asked her if she remembered how we used to make paper valentines together. "Mom, that was forever ago," she said, and it was. But it still lived inside me, that memory of her tiny fingers cutting crooked hearts, the way she leaned her head on my shoulder when she showed me hers. It wasn't just a memory. It was proof of something I thought we shared. Now I realize I was the one holding on to it, alone. There's a danger in romanticizing the past, I know that, but I don't think I'm romanticizing. I think I'm grieving. There's a difference. Romanticizing makes things prettier. Grieving makes them real. And this grief, it's not loud. It's not dramatic. It's just a quiet ache that follows you around the house, slipping into moments that should have been simple. Like walking past their childhood photos and not knowing how to feel. Or folding laundry and realizing no one's noticed that you always fold theirs first. Or hearing a song that used to make them dance and wondering if they'd still remember the steps or that it mattered to you at all. I wonder if I gave too much of myself too early. If by the time they were adults there was nothing new left for them to discover about me, no mystery, no need. Just a woman who always said yes, who always had dinner ready, who didn't complain. A background character in the movie of their lives. But love, real love, isn't supposed to turn you invisible. I don't regret how I raised them. I don't. I believe the world needs more softness, not less. But some days I wish I'd taught them that love isn't just about giving. It's also about noticing, asking, showing up for someone without waiting for a crisis. I think I made them generous people. I just didn't teach them who to be generous to when the cameras weren't watching. And now in the quiet spaces where love should have returned to me, there is only memory. It was a Thursday afternoon when I realized my son no longer remembered the sound of my voice. I had dialed him not out of urgency, just a simple mother's call. I wanted to ask how he was, tell him I saw something on TV that reminded me of a story he loved as a boy. Maybe hear his laugh, that deep rolling one he used to have when he'd tell me knock-knock jokes, and forget the punchlines. But the phone rang 4 times, then voicemail. I waited a few minutes, then called again. Straight to voicemail this time. I didn't leave a message. I told myself he was probably busy a meeting, a drive, a nap. Life is full of distractions. But something about the silence felt different this time. Not accidental, not passive, chosen. He used to call me every Sunday. He'd talk about work, the kids, even ask if I'd tried any new recipes. Those calls got shorter over the years. Then came the skipped Sundays, then the texts instead of calls, then the long gaps where I wondered if I'd imagined our closeness. I once taught him to tie his shoes, to ride a bike, to hold a spoon the right way so soup didn't spill on his shirt. I taught him to say, "I love you" when he left the room, because you never know which goodbye might be the last. He used to whisper it so sweetly, as if it were a secret only we shared. Now I can't remember the last time he said it. A voice memo came hours later, 15 seconds. "Hey, sorry, Mom. Super slammed today. I'll try to call this weekend." No punctuation, no warmth, just a little digital wave and a closed door. I sat on the couch still holding the phone, my tea going cold beside me, and I thought, how does someone forget the voice that once sang them to sleep? How does a child forget the sound of the person who gave them language? When he was small, he used to beg me to stay in his room at night until he fell asleep. He said my voice made the monsters go away, and I stayed. Even when I was tired, even when I had work the next morning, I stayed humming soft songs, reading the same book, for the 100th time. My voice was a kind of magic to him once. Now it's just another thing to silence. I thought maybe I'd done something wrong. Maybe I had said something in our last call, something too motherly, too emotional, too much. But when I replayed our conversations in my mind, there was nothing sharp in them, nothing heavy. Just questions like, "Are you sleeping okay?" Or, "Did the baby get over that cold?" Or, "Have you eaten today?" Those small motherly things. Maybe it's those questions that are too much now. Maybe grown children feel suffocated by softness. Maybe they think love has an expiration date once you stop needing help with your shoelaces. He still sends photos sometimes, the kids playing in the backyard, a drawing one of them made, a new dog. The captions are cheerful, distant. "Look who's growing up fast," or "New trick from Daisy." I smile when I see them, but he never asks how I'm doing, not once. It's a strange thing feeling like a spectator in the life of someone you raised. There are moments when I want to call again, leave a longer voicemail, say the things I've been keeping inside, like how I miss hearing him say my name not as a duty, but as a joy. How I still remember his first words, and how they made me cry in the middle of a grocery store aisle. How I'm still here not just as an obligation, but as someone who loves him, with a heart that still beats his name. But I don't leave those messages. I've learned not to be too much, not to ask for more. That's the lesson I can't seem to unlearn, the one I didn't mean to pass down but did. Maybe my silence taught them more than my words ever did. Maybe my quiet love showed them that real love doesn't need maintenance, that it survives anything. But that's not true. Even love, if ignored long enough, begins to wither. It doesn't vanish overnight. It fades like handwriting on old paper, faint, fragile, still there but hard to read. Sometimes I whisper his name when I'm alone, just to hear it again. Not out loud, just in the breath between heartbeats, as if the echo might reach him, as if the air still carries the mother in me, the woman who once gave him his first lullaby, and now listens only to the quiet. She invited me out for coffee. I was so surprised I almost dropped the plate I was drying. My daughter hadn't asked me to meet her in months, and I told myself not to get my hopes up. Still, I wore the soft pink sweater she once said made me look like a walking rose, and I even curled my hair the way I used to when I'd drop her off at school and wave from the curb. We met at a corner cafe, one of those places where everything smells like roasted beans and nostalgia. She was already seated when I arrived, typing on her phone. She glanced up, smiled politely, and slid her cup aside to make room for mine. I sat down carefully the way older women do when we're trying not to show how much our knees ache. She asked how I was, but it came out more like a greeting than a question. I answered with a story, a small one, about the neighbor's dog who keeps digging up my marigolds and how I've started feeding it treats anyway. I chuckled as I told it, hoping she'd laugh too. But she didn't. She sipped her drink, checked her phone again, and said, "Mom, you're being too emotional again." Too emotional. It was like being slapped with a tissue, soft but humiliating. I nodded, pretending to understand. I bit my lip to keep it from trembling, and I stirred my coffee like it held the answer I didn't want to speak. I used to be the one she told everything to, when she got her period, when she had her first heartbreak, when she was nervous about college. I was the first person she called. She used to lay her head in my lap and say, "Don't ever leave me, okay?" And I'd stroke her hair and promise never. "I'll always be here." And I kept that promise. I was there through everything. Through her messy 20s, through the marriage she rushed into, through the babies and the breakdowns and the nights she said she couldn't do it anymore. I was there. Not just in person, in soul. I gave her pieces of me I'll never get back. And I didn't mind. That's what mothers do. We give and give and give. But now, sitting across from her, watching her scroll, while I swallowed my words with lukewarm coffee, I wondered if I'd given too much of myself away. It wasn't just that she called me emotional, it was the tone, dismissive, like I was an old book she'd already read, no longer worth opening. I wanted to tell her I wasn't trying to make her feel guilty. I only wanted to connect, to be seen, to feel like I still mattered in her world even a little. But I didn't say any of that. I nodded and changed the subject. I asked about her children, her job, her next vacation. I made it about her again. Because I know how to do that. I've been doing it for decades. It's easier than asking for something and being met with a sigh. She finished her coffee before me and said she had to go. She hugged me, one of those quick half-body hugs that doesn't quite touch the heart, and promised to call. I nodded, smiled, watched her walk away, and then I sat there for a while, pretending I wasn't waiting for the sound of the door opening again, pretending I didn't feel like a leftover someone forgot to throw out. It's strange, the loneliness that comes from being next to someone you love who no longer sees you. It's not sharp, it's dull, like the ache in your joints on a rainy day, always there, always familiar, always just enough to make everything else feel a little heavier. As I sat there, my coffee growing cold and untouched, I thought about how she used to clutch my hand in crowded places, how she'd say, "Don't let go," and I never did, not once. Through everything I held on. But she let go, slowly over the years, a finger at a time, until all that was left was a woman sitting alone in a cafe, wondering how love could turn so quiet. I didn't cry until I got home, not out loud, just a wetness in my eyes that refused to fall, and that sentence kept echoing in my mind, "You're being too emotional." As if emotion were a flaw, as if feeling deeply were something to be corrected, not cherished. I taught her to feel, to speak, to cry, when the world hurt too much. I told her there was no shame in tears, and now she tells me to silence mine. I don't blame her, not entirely. The world taught her that strength is cold and independence is silence. But still, she learned from me, and I wonder if she's forgotten how to sit with emotion. Does that mean I failed her? Or worse, does that mean she failed me? There was a time I thought I had done it all right. Not perfect, but right. I didn't yell much. I didn't shame them. I taught them how to be gentle, how to apologize when they were wrong, how to see the world not just through their own eyes, but through the hearts of others. I wanted them to be kind, not just well-mannered, truly kind, the kind of people who wouldn't leave anyone behind, the kind of people who'd notice when someone's hands were trembling even if they smiled through it. I told them to love generously, to be the first to say sorry, to say I love you even when they were mad, to forgive, to choose grace over pride. And they did, at least when they were young. I saw it in the way they took care of each other, the way they'd make room for the lonely kid at lunch, the way they once cried when they saw an injured bird on the sidewalk. I was proud of them, so proud. But I never thought to teach them that their mother needed love too. It didn't occur to me. Isn't that strange? I thought if I gave enough, if I poured enough of myself into them, it would come back naturally. Like a garden, you tend with your bare hands and trust to grow. But something went wrong in the soil. They aren't cruel. That's what makes it harder. They don't shout at me. They don't push me away with fists or harsh words. No, their absence is softer, more polite, like a door that's never locked, but somehow never opens either. They forget me kindly, gently, as if they assume I'll always be there sitting by the window, just in case they remember. I never imagined love could feel like being erased. I've been to dinners with them, birthdays, holidays, where I've barely spoken. Not because I didn't want to, but because no one asked. They talk over each other, laugh, share stories, and sometimes they'll look at me and smile like I'm part of the furniture. Present, familiar, harmless. I nod. I laugh in the right places. But inside I'm screaming, "Do you see me? I'm still here. I'm not done yet." They assume I don't have stories of my own, that my life started and ended with them. And I fed that belief, didn't I, every time I said, "Don't worry about me," or "I'm fine," or "You go have fun." I erased myself with every gentle dismissal of my own needs. I wrapped their lives around mine and forgot to leave space for my own voice. And now that voice is so quiet, even I can barely hear it sometimes. I used to think I was the glue, holding everything together with quiet strength. But glue dries out. It cracks. And when it's no longer needed, people throw it away, never thinking twice about all the things it once held together. I remember watching them play on the floor, their little legs tucked underneath them, blocks and dolls scattered everywhere, and I'd kneel beside them, pretending to sip invisible tea, pretending to be a queen or a dragon, or whatever their wild little minds had invented. I gave them my time, my knees, my back, my patience. I gave them my everything. And now I sometimes wonder if they even remember those moments, or if I'm just a faded figure in the background of their childhood, the one who held the camera but never appeared in the pictures. I see the way they love their friends, the way they post birthday tributes with paragraphs of memories and affection, the way they drop everything for a coworker in crisis. I raise them to care for others, and they do. Just not for me, or not in ways that reach me anymore. Maybe they think I don't need it, that I'm too strong, that I've always been the one who gives, and surely I must be fine with that. But I'm not. I am tired of being invisible, of being thanked only in speeches, not in phone calls, of being honored on Mother's Day with flowers but forgotten the rest of the year, of being the woman who once gave them everything and now receives almost nothing in return. Love isn't a debt, I know that. I don't want payback, but I do want presence. I want to be asked, "How are you really?" and not just as a formality. I want them to listen the way I once listened to them when they told me about monsters under the bed. I want to be seen not as a relic of their past, but as a person who still aches and hopes and dreams and feels. I want to matter. I want to feel just once, like all that love I gave them taught them not only how to give, but how to see the person who gave it. Because I didn't raise them to be cruel, but sometimes kindness without attention becomes its own kind of cruelty. I remember that Sunday vividly, not because anything dramatic happened, but because of how ordinary it was. They had said they'd come, both of them, my son and my daughter. Just a casual lunch they'd promised. I had asked for nothing grand. "I'll cook," I'd said cheerfully, pretending it wasn't a plea. "Just something simple, your favorites." They'd agreed, or at least not refused. I took that as a yes. Maybe I shouldn't have. The night before, I soaked the beans. I thawed the meat. I kneaded dough for the flatbread that takes time and tenderness, the kind I always used to make on weekends when the house was still full of noise and messy footprints and laughter. I even cleaned the back porch, hoping we could sit outside like we used to when they were children, warm plates balanced on our knees, a breeze tugging at paper napkins. That morning I rose early, even though my back ached more than usual. I wore the blouse with the embroidered sleeves, the one they'd once complimented on a family trip. I set the table with care. 2 extra chairs, 2 folded napkins, 2 sets of everything. It felt like preparing for a celebration. Not a holiday, just the rare and sacred event of not being alone. I kept glancing at the clock. Noon, then 1, then 2. No calls, no messages. I stood at the window trying not to seem like I was waiting. I watered the plants with trembling hands, rearranged the dishes 3 times. Every car that slowed outside made my heart leap and fall in the same breath. By 4 o'clock, I turned off the oven. The food had gone cold, not just in temperature and spirit. Eventually, I sat down at the table alone. I served myself a plate, not out of hunger but habit. I chewed slowly, numbly, tasting nothing. The napkins stayed folded. The chairs remained empty. The food that once smelled like love now sat in silence, growing dry, untouched. It wasn't the first time they'd done this, promised and not come. But somehow this one hurt more. Maybe because I'd allowed myself to hope, to imagine, to believe foolishly that this time would be different. Later that night, my daughter texted, "Sorry, Mom, something came up. Next weekend, maybe." Next weekend. Like love is a subscription that can be rescheduled. Like mothers are calendar events you can click snooze on without consequence. I didn't reply. Not out of anger, but because I didn't know how to answer without sounding desperate. And I've learned that desperation from mothers makes grown children uncomfortable. They don't know what to do with it. It makes them look away. After cleaning up scraping plates of untouched food into the trash, wiping down counters that had been so full of care hours before I sat on the edge of my bed and stared at the ceiling. It was so quiet I could hear the distant hum of the refrigerator, the soft tick of the hallway clock, and the sound of my own breath trying not to turn into sobs. I thought about how many meals I had made for them in their lives. Thousands, probably. Every lunchbox packed with their favorite things. Every birthday cake shaped like their favorite cartoon. Every bowl of soup delivered to their sickbed. And now, when I make a meal just for the sake of seeing them, they forget. Or worse, they remember, but choose something else. That's when it hit me, love, when unreciprocated doesn't stay soft forever. It stiffens. It changes shape. It curls in on itself like a letter never sent, folded so tightly the paper it cracks. I wonder if they think I don't notice, that I just keep going because that's what I've always done, that I'll always be the one to forgive, to forget to try again. And maybe that's true, but it's not without cost. Each quiet rejection adds another stone to the weight I carry in my chest. Not heavy enough to crush me, but enough to make every breath a little harder. I didn't tell anyone what happened that day, not even the neighbor who waves to me from her porch. I just smiled, watered my plants the next morning, and told myself the lie that mothers tell, it's fine, they're busy, it's just how life goes. But that lie is wearing thin. I went up to the attic that evening, searching for something I couldn't quite name, maybe a distraction. Maybe proof that I had once been loved out loud. The stairs creaked beneath me the way they always do, old wood holding old weight. I hadn't been up there in months. The dust hung in the air like memory itself, floating lazily in the slant of the setting sun that cut across the room through a single small window. I opened the cedar chest first. It smelled of age and lavender and something softer, something like time. Inside, wrapped in yellowing tissue, were the letters. Love letters. Not to me, not yet, but from me. Letters I wrote to their father when we were young and foolish and full of wanting. He used to keep them tucked in his drawer. I don't know how they ended up here, bundled in string, forgotten. I hadn't touched them in years. The handwriting looked foreign now, rounder, hopeful, like the girl I used to be before I became their mother. I opened one, then another. I read my own words with the distance of a stranger. You make me feel seen. I love how you laugh with your whole chest. I hope our children grow up knowing love like this. That last one made me pause. Because they did, didn't they? They knew bedtime kisses. They knew gentle hands untangling their hair. They knew stories whispered in the dark, surprise pancakes on rainy days, notes in lunchboxes, arms wrapped tight around sobbing shoulders. They knew love that said, you're safe here, you're enough, you're wanted. So where did it go? Did they forget, or did it never land as deeply as I hoped? I thought about the years after those letters, how things got quiet between their father and me, how we stopped writing, stopped reaching. We became ships in a harbor, useful, predictable, and utterly alone. But I never let that silence touch them. I filled their world with warmth even when my own life grew cold. And maybe that's where I made my mistake. Maybe they never saw me as someone who needed anything. Maybe they thought I was the one who gave love, not the one who might wither without it. I pulled out a small box buried in the corner. Inside were more letters, this time theirs. Childhood scrawls. I love you, Mommy. You're the best cooker in the world. Thank you for fixing my favorite bear. I ran my fingers over the shaky lines, the backwards, R's, the hearts, drawn with too many curves. They had loved me once, fiercely, simply, before the world taught them to move fast, talk less, and schedule everything, even affection. I sat down on the dusty attic floor, surrounded by these pieces of paper that once meant the world. I should have felt comforted, maybe, but I didn't. I felt hollow. Because paper love doesn't keep you company. It doesn't notice when your voice trembles. It doesn't say, You okay, Mom, when your hands shake, trying to open a jar. It doesn't sit across from you and ask about your dreams, the ones you still have even now, though no one thinks to ask anymore. I folded the letters, gently returned them to the box, and sat in the silence. I had given them a language of love, and they'd used it beautifully as children. But now in adulthood they spoke another language, one of obligation, of convenience, of absence softened by emojis and late replies. I don't want grand gestures. I never did. I want presence, attention. That's all. A single call that doesn't feel rushed. A cup of tea shared without phones between us. A moment, just one, where I feel like someone they long to see, not someone they check off a list. Love letters don't need paper anymore. I know that. They look like messages now, like calendars with reminders like, let's FaceTime soon. But even those have grown rare. And I wonder if I died tomorrow, would they read these old letters and weep? Would they say I should have called more? Would they finally see me? It's a strange thing, mourning the living, missing people who still exist, just not for you. It's not loud. It's not dramatic. It's a soft erosion of presence, of memory, of mattering. I left the attic, slowly carrying the box like something sacred. I placed it gently on my nightstand, not because I wanted to read it again, but because I needed a reminder that I once meant something, that I once had a voice they heard, that maybe I still do. It didn't happen all at once. The shift from being the center of their world to being its distant edge, it crept in slowly, like dusk swallowing daylight. One moment they were children who ran to me with scraped knees and secrets too big for their little chests. The next they were grown with lives I could only glimpse through filtered photos and delayed texts. At first I told myself it was normal. They're adults now. They have responsibilities, jobs, children of their own. And I was proud, truly proud, to see them standing on their own feet. I had raised them to be strong, independent. I didn't want them to need me in every way. I just didn't expect they'd stop needing me at all. I started noticing patterns. They called when they needed something, a recipe, a babysitter, a quick favor, a ride to the airport. They were always polite, always cheerful, and always in a hurry. Thanks, Mom. You're the best. And then they'd hang up, and I'd be left staring at the phone, wondering if that tiny rush of gratitude was supposed to carry me through the rest of the week. I don't mind doing things for them. That's not it. Giving has always been the language I speak best. But somewhere along the way, the giving became one-sided. They stopped asking how I was. They stopped calling just to hear my voice. My birthday became a text. Mother's Day, a flower delivery with a printed card. The last time I got a real phone call, one without a request, stitched inside, I think it was almost a year ago. My daughter called because she was driving alone at night and wanted company on the road. We talked about nothing in particular, the weather, the kids, an old neighbor who had passed. When she hung up, I realized I had smiled the whole time. It felt like being chosen. But now I don't feel chosen. I feel used and forgotten. I wonder if they even know who I am outside of being their mother. Do they know the books I love? The way I cry at the same movie every time? That I still dance when I'm alone in the kitchen, swaying to the songs that once played on cassette tapes while they napped in the other room? Do they know that I get lonely? That sometimes the silence in the house is so complete, I leave the TV on just to feel like I'm not the last human left? I used to believe that love would be enough, that if I poured kindness and sacrifice and softness into them, they'd mirror it back. But kindness, when it's expected, stops feeling like a gift. It becomes background noise, something you don't thank because you assume it will always be there. And I was always there, Even when I was tired, even when I felt invisible, I thought that's what a mother does. She stays, she listens, she gives even when no one notices. But now I wonder if I should have said no more often, if I should have let them see me not just as a mother, but as a woman, a person with needs, with limits, with her own aching heart. There's a certain heartbreak in realizing your children don't see you fully. They see the title mom. They see the function babysitter, counselor, chef, nurse, but not the soul, not the woman who used to write poetry in the middle of the night, who once dreamed of traveling, who still wonders what it might feel like to be asked about her day and really listened to. One afternoon, my daughter asked me to pick up her youngest from school. Of course I said yes. I rearranged my errands, skipped my lunch. When I brought him home, she barely looked up from her laptop. "Thanks, Mom," she mumbled. And I stood there in the hallway holding his backpack like I didn't quite know where to go. That's the thing about being useful. People stop checking in on whether you're willing. They just assume. Later that evening, I sat in my own kitchen reheating soup I hadn't wanted in the first place. And I thought, this isn't love. This is expectation. This is convenience, dressed up in familiar smiles. I taught them to love, but I didn't teach them to pause, to reflect, to wonder what it costs the person who's always giving. And now I'm left wondering if I ever truly knew what love meant for me, or if I just built my identity on their happiness, hoping it would be enough, hoping they'd remember to give a little of it back. It was a brief conversation, the kind you don't expect to stay with you, and yet it did. I was sitting at the bus stop waiting to go to a doctor's appointment I didn't tell anyone about. Not serious, just a checkup. But still it would have been nice to have someone ask, "Do you want me to come with you?" Or even, "How'd it go?" The only other person at the stop was a woman, a little younger than me, wearing a blue raincoat, even though the sky was dry. We made small talk as strangers do. The weather, the bus schedule. Then she smiled and said, "Do you have kids?" I nodded. "2," I said, maybe a little too quickly, like it was still the proudest fact of my life. Her eyes lit up. "Oh, that's wonderful. Do you see them often?" I smiled. I lied. All the time I said, my voice a little too cheerful, a little too bright. They're always calling, dropping by, bringing the grandkids. She looked so delighted for me. She said, "That's beautiful. You must have done something right." And in that moment I felt like an imposter, like someone who had borrowed someone else's joy and tried it on for size. It didn't fit, but I wore it anyway. After she boarded her bus and waved goodbye, I sat there for a while. Let the lie settle on my shoulders like a shawl stitched from old wishes. I wasn't ashamed of my children, but I was ashamed of what the truth sounded like out loud. They don't call much. They're too busy. I mostly hear from them when they need something. I spend more time with their photos than with them. These are not the things you tell strangers. These are not the truths you confess at bus stops. So instead you smile and say, "Yes, they're wonderful," and then you carry that lie home like a purse filled with old receipts, crumpled, forgotten, but still taking up space. I sat on the bus and stared out the window, watching the world pass by. In a blur, my reflection stared back at me in the glass, older, softer eyes, duller than I remembered. And I thought, how did I get here? I used to be so full of purpose. I was the planner, the organizer, the one who remembered dentist appointments and packed extra mittens. My life had structure, rhythm, sound. And now, the days blend into each other. I wake, I clean, I wait. I fill the time with small things, laundry, crossword puzzles, phone games, with fake rewards. But nothing fills the space they left. I think what hurts most isn't the absence. It's the invisibility. knowing they're out there living full lives while I fade quietly into the background, like wallpaper they no longer notice. Sometimes I wonder if they think about me at all, not just out of obligation, but spontaneously. Do they ever hear a song and think Mom would like this? Do they ever see something in a store and feel an instinct to tell me? Or has my image shrunk in their minds to something vague and easy to overlook? Once I was the first person they thought of in the morning, the last before they slept. Now I'm lucky if I cross their minds between meetings and errands and social plans. It's not hatred. It's not malice. It's just absence. And that might be even harder to name. I didn't lie to that woman at the bus stop because I'm weak. I lied because I still wanted to believe the version of my life where love came back to me, where the hands I once held so tightly would reach for mine again, not because they needed something, but because they missed me. And maybe I'll never have that version. But for a brief moment in the smile of a stranger, I pretended I did, and it felt like standing in sunlight, warm, fleeting, not quite real, but beautiful all the same. There's a mirror in my bedroom I used to avoid. It hangs above the dresser, framed in dark oak, slightly tilted from age. For a long time I only used it for quick glances, smoothing my hair, checking for a stray eyelash. I never lingered. I didn't want to see what time had done to me, not because I feared aging, but because I feared disappearing. One morning, after a particularly sleepless night, I stood in front of it and really looked, not quickly, not from the corner of my eye. I faced myself fully honestly, and for a moment I didn't recognize the woman staring back. Her skin had softened and sagged in places that once held muscle and light. Her eyes, still brown, held a dulled shine. There was a heaviness in her jaw, a tiredness behind her brows, but what struck me most wasn't her age, it was her aloneness. I saw it in the slope of her shoulders, the way her lips pressed together, as if they'd forgotten how to open for joy. I looked like someone waiting for something that might never come. And behind me in the reflection was the room itself, clean, quiet, tidy in the way only a lonely room can be. No toys scattered on the carpet. No shoes at the door, no half-drunk mugs of coffee left behind by guests. Just stillness. I sat on the edge of the bed looking at that woman in the mirror, and I whispered, not even sure why I'm still here. The words caught in my throat. I hadn't meant to say them. They weren't for anyone but me. A small reminder, a protest, a prayer. Because sometimes I think they've forgotten that I am still a person, still alive, still learning, still longing. They know I exist, of course. They know I breathe, that I go to the store, that I water my plants, pay my bills. But they don't know what stirs in me anymore. They don't ask what makes me sad, or what I dream about when the house is dark, and I'm alone with the sound of ticking clocks and tired thoughts. They don't see me brushing my hair slowly as if trying to remember the last time someone touched it for love. They don't hear the small sighs I let out as I fold laundry, the ones that come from memories rising up uninvited. Sometimes I sit by the window with a cup of tea and imagine one of them pulling into the driveway, unannounced, with a smile that says, "I was just thinking about you." But the driveway stays empty, and I drink my tea before it gets cold. Because some things, if you don't tend to them, just turn bitter. The hardest part of all this isn't that they've moved on, it's that they never looked back. I think I could have handled the distance if it came with gratitude, if they had said, "You made me strong. You gave me everything. Thank you." But that thanks never came. Not really. Not in the way that reaches the soul and says, "You mattered." They thank me with convenience now, a forwarded meme, a 2-word reply. "Thanks, Mom." They don't know that sometimes I read those messages 3 or 4 times just to stretch out the feeling of being acknowledged. There's no malice in them. That's what makes it harder to name. They're good people. They care about the world. But somewhere along the way, they stopped caring for me. At least not in a way I can feel. The mirror didn't lie. It showed me what I had become, a woman still full of love, still reaching out in invisible ways, still waiting to be seen. And the room behind me echoed the truth. I've built a life out of their absence. And somehow I'm still here. Still brushing my hair, still setting 2 places at the table out of habit, still whispering goodnight into a room where no one answers back. Still hoping foolishly maybe that someday they'll look in a mirror and see me standing behind them, not as a shadow, but as a woman who gave and waited and stayed. I don't remember the exact moment I stopped explaining myself, only the slow, strange peace that followed. It began like most things do for women like me, not with a bang, but with a silence that grew too heavy to carry politely. I used to try, to explain, to soften, to wrap my sadness in jokes, to put a ribbon on my disappointment so no one had to feel bad about it. When they forgot to call, I'd say, "I know you're busy." When they skipped my birthday, I'd say, "Don't worry, I didn't feel like celebrating anyway." When they hurt me, not on purpose, never on purpose, I would swallow the bruise and offer a smile. That's what I thought mothers were supposed to do, protect their children not just from the world, but from their own guilt. But guilt, when always absorbed by someone else, turns into habit, and habit becomes neglect. One afternoon, my daughter sent a message, one of those casual texts, with a half-formed apology tucked inside. "Sorry I've been MIA, life's been insane. Hope you're good." I stared at the screen for a while. I could have replied with what I was really feeling. "I miss you. I'm lonely. I waited for you to remember me." But I didn't. Not this time. I put the phone down. I didn't reply, not out of anger, but because I was finally tired of being the only one holding the thread between us. I realized that for years I'd been keeping the connection alive by sheer will, reminding, forgiving, initiating, and I wondered what would happen if I simply stopped pulling. So I did. I stopped texting first. I stopped sending reminders for family birthdays, stopped suggesting get-togethers. I didn't reach out with old photos or recipes or thought of you, notes. And the silence that followed was deafening. Days passed, then weeks, and nothing came. That's when the clarity began to bloom, painful but clean. They hadn't been staying close out of mutual desire. They had stayed because I'd made it easy, because I had done all the emotional labor of connection. I had kept our story moving forward like a playwright writing all the dialogue herself and waiting for the actors to show up. And now, with the pen finally dropped, there was nothing but blank space. At first it hurt more than I expected. I thought, this will break me. But it didn't. The quiet, once unfamiliar, began to take shape around me like a room I had forgotten how to enter. A room with my name on it. My stories, my needs, my voice. It didn't happen quickly. Grief rarely does. There were nights I cried not loudly, but the kind of crying that sounds like breath, soft, restrained, afraid of its own volume. I'd sit on the edge of the bed and press a pillow to my chest just to feel something solid. But after each wave of sadness, I began to feel something else beneath it. Relief. I hadn't realized how much energy I was using to keep pretending everything was fine, how much it cost to constantly interpret their absence in the most generous light, how exhausting it was to cover their neglect with excuses so they wouldn't have to face the discomfort of seeing me hurt. Letting go of that role, the always smiling, always understanding mother, gave me space to simply be a person again. Not just a provider of warmth, but a human being who deserved it too. I didn't announce anything. No dramatic confrontation, no bitter declarations. just a gentle withdrawing of the hands I'd always held out, palms up, waiting for theirs to find mine. Somewhere along the way I learned to be okay with the quiet, not because it was what I wanted, but because it was real. And real even when painful is better than performance. Now when the phone buzzes and it's not them, I don't ache the same way. I still feel it, that little pinch of longing, but it no longer unravels me. I no longer feel like a woman waiting to be chosen. I'm just a woman, living, breathing, existing in her own truth. I make tea for one now and don't set out an extra cup just in case. I go on walks without checking my phone. I read aloud sometimes just to hear a voice in the room, even if it's only mine. I used to think I had to explain my sadness to be allowed to feel it. Now I let it live in me without justification. And oddly enough, in that space where apology used to be something softer, has grown a quiet kind of dignity, the kind that says, I still love you, but I won't shrink for you anymore. I am not just the background to your life. I am the whole scene you left too soon. There's an ache that comes when you realize you taught all the right lessons, but forgot the one you needed most. I raised my children to be good to others, to give without expectation, to be the helper in any room. I told them that kindness was strength, that love meant putting others first. But I didn't teach them where love should begin, with boundaries, with the quiet but firm recognition that love without respect isn't really love at all. I never taught them to love me in return, not properly, not actively. I showed them that my love came without limits, without asking for anything back, and they learned that lesson well, too well. Now when I say no, it lands like a foreign language. It happened not long ago. My daughter called. She needed help watching the kids again. I could hear the edge of desperation in her voice, and I wanted to help. I always do. But my knees had been aching for days, and I had a doctor's appointment already booked that morning. I hesitated for just a second before saying, I'm sorry, sweetheart. I can't this time. The silence that followed was sharp. Then came the sigh, the disappointment. Not anger, something worse. That flat tone like I had let her down, not as a mother, but as a fixture in her life. Like the lamp had suddenly stopped working, and she was annoyed that the light she expected wasn't there. She said, okay, but it was laced with something quiet and cutting. She didn't ask why. She didn't offer concern, just a pause, then, well, I'll figure something out the way you do when you realize your usual tool is broken. And I felt it again, that sting of being used up not by malice, but by a pattern I helped build. I should have told her softly what I was feeling, but I didn't. I said, let me know how it goes, and we hung up both pretending everything was fine. But it wasn't. That evening, I sat on the porch and thought about all the times I said yes when my body begged me not to, the errands I ran, the favors I agreed to, the nights I drove across town just to deliver soup and a hug even when I hadn't slept. I never wanted medals or praise. I just wanted to be remembered not for what I gave, but for the love that shaped every yes. But when yes becomes the only word you're allowed to say, you stop being a person. You become a service. And slowly, I began to understand. I had taught them how to take care of others, but never how to turn around and ask, who's caring for her? I had modeled unconditional love. I had shown up again and again, even when I was hurting, even when I felt invisible. But I didn't teach them that a mother too has limits, that love has a structure, that saying no can be an act of deep self-love, not rejection. They saw my sacrifices as the default, and why wouldn't they? I made them look effortless. I hid the fatigue, the worry, the loneliness. I made it look like I never needed anything. I wanted to be strong for them, but maybe what I needed was to be seen in my weakness too. Now I'm learning to say no, even when my heart aches to say yes. No, I can't drive across town on a whim. No, I'm not available every weekend. No, I won't drop everything because your schedule shifted. And I'm learning to say yes to myself quietly, cautiously. Yes, I'm tired. Yes, I need rest. Yes, I matter, even if no one's looking. It isn't easy. The guilt still knocks on my door like a child who forgot their key, but I try not to let it in. I sit with it. I breathe through it. And slowly I build a new kind of love, not the love that gives until it disappears, but the love that endures, because it finally includes me. If they never learn this lesson, I'll survive. I'll still love them always, but I'll also love myself enough not to break for them anymore. Because boundaries aren't walls. They're doors that close gently when the house needs quiet. And I've lived too long in rooms where my voice was muffled by everyone else's comfort. Now I choose silence only when it heals, not when it hides. I didn't expect much when I sent the quilt. Just a thank you, a small acknowledgement. A photo maybe of the baby wrapped in the fabric I stitched with tired hands and borrowed energy. I'd worked on it for weeks, piecing together squares from old dresses, soft flannels, bits of fabric that once held memories of my children's own early years. I embroidered their initials in one corner, and in the other I sewed a tiny heart. It was my gift to my grandchild, a piece of legacy, not something bought from a store, but something made of my time, my love, and a few late nights at the kitchen table under the yellow light of a flickering bulb. I even packed it carefully folded just right, with a little note tucked inside. For the newest member of our family, may you always be warm, even when the world feels cold. I didn't hear anything for days, then weeks. No call, no text, no photo. I tried not to take it personally. Maybe the package got lost. Maybe they were busy. Newborns bring chaos. I reminded myself of this again and again, but the tracking said it arrived. I double-checked. They had received it. Still, nothing. I waited another few days, then sent a message. Casual, breezy. Just checking. Did the quilt make it to you safely? The reply came late that night. A simple, "Oh yes, thanks," and that was all. No punctuation, no photo of the baby, no mention of the note, no warmth, just confirmation. I stared at the screen for a long time. That was the moment I felt something shift inside me, not break exactly, but settle, like a curtain being drawn closed at the end of a performance. No applause, just quiet. It wasn't about the thank you, really. It was about being seen. I had poured part of myself into that quilt, not just thread and fabric, but memory, intention. I had imagined them holding it and thinking, she still loves us like this. She still wants to be part of our story. But they didn't see it that way. To them, it was just a blanket. I sat in my living room that night with the lamp on low, my sewing basket beside me, untouched. I ran my fingers over a scrap of soft cotton that used to be my daughter's favorite dress when she was 3, pale yellow with little daisies. She called it her sunshine dress. She used to twirl in it so proudly, the hem flaring like a bell. I had cut a square from that dress and stitched it into the quilt. They'll never know that. And that's when it struck me. I carry memories no one asks about. I hold pieces of them in drawers and old boxes in my heart, and they don't even know those pieces exist. They live in the present, always moving forward. And I live in the echoes, in the fabric, in the quiet offerings they no longer recognize as love. It isn't their fault, I suppose. The world teaches people to value what's fast, what's loud, what's branded, and shiny and new. My kind of love, the homemade, handwritten, soft and slow kind, doesn't sparkle. It doesn't announce itself. It just waits. And if no one picks it up, it fades. But still I wish they had seen it, not the quilt me. I thought about calling just to explain what went into it, the stitches, the memories, the hope, but something held me back. Not pride, not quite. Just the realization that if I have to explain why it mattered, they'll never truly understand. So I let it be. The next morning, I folded the baby's photo from the birth announcement and placed it gently in my journal. Then I wrote beneath it, "Today I remembered that not all love is returned, but that doesn't make it less real." And it's true. Love, even unanswered, still holds meaning. It still matters. It's still mine. I can't make them see it. I can't force them to feel it. But I can choose to keep offering it in ways that honor me, not diminish me. I still make quilts sometimes, but now I make them for neighbors, for charities, for children I'll never meet. And when I stitch, I think about how love, when given freely, still ripples outward even if it never comes back the way you hoped. That quilt may never mean to them what it meant to me, but I'll never stop loving in my language, even if they no longer speak it. I keep a small drawer in my bedside table, not the top one, the one just below it. That's where I put things I don't want to throw away, but can't quite face often either. Old letters, photographs, a bracelet my son made me in 2nd grade with beads spelling out, "Best Mom," a dried daisy pressed between 2 index cards, and recently something new letters I wrote to them, but never sent. I started writing them on a day when the house felt especially empty, the kind of quiet that hums against your bones and makes your footsteps sound too loud. I had tried calling, but both went to voicemail. I didn't leave a message. I just sat at the kitchen table with a pen and a pad of paper, and I wrote to them, the way I used to, when they were away at summer camp, like they were still children, and I was still someone they missed. The first letter was for my daughter. I told her I missed our conversations. I told her about the way her laugh used to bounce through the hallway when she was little. I reminded her of the time she came home crying because a friend had betrayed her, and how we sat in the bathtub fully clothed, letting the water run as she sobbed in my arms. I didn't ask her to come visit. I didn't ask her to call. I just told her who I used to be to her. The second letter was for my son. I told him how proud I was when he learned to ride his bike without training wheels, how he fell 3 times and kept going. I told him I still had the comic book he made when he was 12, the one where he drew me as a superhero with a frying pan shield. I wrote that I still make his favorite stew every now and then, even though there's no one left to eat it. I didn't blame them in these letters. I didn't scold. I just remembered aloud. I wrote what I wish they remembered too. I tucked the letters into the drawer and didn't tell anyone. Not because I was afraid, but because they weren't for guilt. They were for grief, a way to speak to the silence. A way to hold myself together with words when presence had failed me. And in that small act of writing without expectation of releasing without sending, I found a strange kind of peace. I don't think they'll ever read them. I'm not sure they'd understand if they did. Not yet, anyway. Maybe one day when they're older, when their own children grow up and the silence begins to echo in their own homes. Maybe then they'll find the drawer. Maybe then the words will reach them the way my voice can't right now. Sometimes I open the drawer just to see the envelope's simple white unaddressed. Proof that I still have something to say, that I still hold them close even in their distance. It's strange the ways we continue to love, how we fold it into quiet rituals. A cup of tea made the way they liked it, even if no one drinks it. A song played softly just to remember the way they used to sing along. A letter written and unsent, because the act of writing is its own kind of healing. I used to think that to be loved meant to be seen, heard, remembered. Now I think to love someone who no longer sees you is its own sacred kind of strength. These letters, these unsent, unread, unfolding pieces of me, are not confessions. They are declarations that I was here, that I gave everything, that I loved without conditions and still do even as the space between us grows. I may never hear them say I remember that, Mom. I may never get back what I gave, but the love I offered, the memories, the care, the years, they live somewhere, even if only in this drawer. And maybe that's enough. I don't remember the exact moment I let go, not like a door slamming, more like a window left open until the breeze slowly carried everything out. One morning, I realized I hadn't thought about calling them, not out of resentment, but because I no longer clung to the hope that they might call me first. The ache had dulled, the sharpness had softened, and in its place something else had grown. Not happiness exactly, but quiet. And in that quiet, I found something close to peace. It wasn't a grand epiphany, just a morning like any other. I made my tea. I watered my plants. I sat by the window and watched the light move across the floorboards like a gentle wave. And I realized I wasn't waiting anymore. I used to live in a state of readiness. The house clean, the phone charged the mind, rehearsing possible conversations, always preparing for the moment they might remember me. But now the phone sat untouched for hours and I didn't check it. I didn't count the days since their last message. I didn't keep track of who had forgotten what. Because somewhere along the way I remembered myself. Not the mother version, not the provider, the fixer, the dependable shoulder, but the woman. The girl who used to love the smell of rain on hot pavement. The young wife who once danced barefoot in the kitchen just to make her husband laugh. The woman who writes poems in the margins of grocery lists and still cries at old movies she's seen a dozen times. I started doing small things for myself. I took out the old teacups, the delicate porcelain ones I'd saved for company, and began using them just for me. I played the piano again slowly, fingers stumbling but free. I lit candles in the evening and read aloud even when no one was listening. One night I cooked a meal and set the table for two, not because I expected anyone, but because I missed sharing space. I filled the other plate with flowers from the garden and let them sit across from me like a reminder I'm still worthy of beauty. I still love my children. That will never change, but I no longer tether my worth to their attention. I no longer measure my day by whether they remembered I existed. I have let go not of them, but of the version of me who needed their validation to feel full. Letting go doesn't mean closing the door. It means no longer standing at it waiting for someone else to walk through. I think they might notice eventually. Maybe not now, maybe not next year, but someday. Maybe when they're older, when their own children begin to drift, the way they drifted from me. Maybe then they'll think of me not just as someone who loved them, but someone they should have loved better. And maybe they'll come back, maybe not. But if they do, they'll find a woman who doesn't need to be rescued from her loneliness, a woman who's made peace with the silence, who has learned how to sit with herself and feel not empty, but whole. These days, I still make tea for two, but the second cup is no longer a waiting seat. It's a symbol, a soft ritual, a way of saying I remember what it felt like to be needed. But now I choose to need myself. I still keep their photos on the mantle. I still smile when I think of their childhoods. I still whisper their names in prayer, but I no longer beg the universe to bring them back to me. Because I never truly left. I was here all along. There's a kind of stillness that only comes after you've made peace with being forgotten. It doesn't rush in. It settles, like dusk across a quiet porch, like steam rising from a mug you made just for yourself. It isn't loneliness anymore. It's something gentler, something earned. I don't need them to understand everything I gave. I don't need them to count the nights I stayed up, or the meals I made, or the ways I softened their world, so they'd never feel sharp edges too soon. That was my gift. And gifts, real ones, don't come with ledgers. They come with love. I think maybe I taught them love too quietly, too invisibly. I made it seamless, painless, effortless, so much so they mistook it for the background. But that's what mothers do, isn't it? We become the wallpaper of their lives, always there, always faded, always assumed. But I'm not a background. I'm still here. A woman with hands that remember rocking babies and scrubbing floors and writing long, unacknowledged notes. A woman who still smiles when the wind reminds her of spring mornings when the children were small and their laughter lived in the corners of every room. I've stopped chasing their attention, not out of bitterness, but because I realize that some of the most profound forms of love are quiet exits, not slamming doors, but simply walking away from the threshold with dignity intact, leaving space behind, not emptiness, silence, not shame. If they ever turn around, they might find me again, older perhaps, quieter, yes, but still whole, still soft, still loving, but no longer waiting. I gave them all the best of me, and now in these slow, sacred days, I give what's left to myself, the morning sun, the good china, the last slice of pie, the long exhale after years of holding my breath. I don't regret the love I gave. I only wish I had kept a little more of it for me. But it's not too late. Because now when I walk past the mirror, I no longer flinch. I look, I nod, I smile, and I whisper the truth, gentle and unshaken. They forgot me, but I never forgot myself.